This is Ask an Entomologist, and what we're going to be doing is doing a question and answer Q&A with an insect expert. Today, we're going to be featuring Dr. Arthur Appel. He's a professor in the Auburn Department of Entomology and Plant Pathology. My name is Richard Murphy. I'm a master's student, and I'm going to be the host. And Dr. Appel, I'll let you briefly introduce yourself.
Well, thank you, Richard. As you said, I'm Arthur Appel. I've been a professor of entomology at Auburn University for about 35 years. Before that, I went to graduate school at University of California, Riverside, and then I have a bachelor's degree from UCLA. And I'm an urban entomologist and insect physiologist. So fire away with questions.
Oh, wow. There we go. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Appel. It looks like we have the expert indeed. So our first question is going to come in from Jody. Now, Jody asked, we found a blister beetle in our flower bed yesterday. We released it after learning all about it, but we'd be interested in learning more about how their juices work, particularly in assisting in the dermatology field, removing warts and such, and what it actually does to your skin to cause blisters. I assume we shouldn't be handling them?
Well, Jody, I agree. You should not be handling them, at least not with your bare hands. You could probably handle them with some sort of a glove like many of us are using these days. The defensive secretion that blister beetles produce is the active ingredient is something called cantharidin. Now, this is a lipid or fat type greasy substance that can penetrate into your skin and actually cause your skin cells to produce enzymes that cause the skin to separate. And when the skin separates, it forms blisters. So these blister beetles do indeed have poisons or secretions that cause blisters. Now, this can be a boon if you're worried about something like warts, because there are several treatments where this cantharidin is actually placed on the wart. The skin separates, taking the virus that causes the wart and separating it from the rest of the skin. This comes off, and then cantharidin really doesn't leave any scarring, so you can get rid of the wart that way. There are lots of other medications that can be used for warts, and I'm not exactly sure which medicine you would buy that has cantharidin, but that would be the active ingredient. Now, the question is also, well, why do those beetles have this stuff? I mean, yeah. Well, it's a defensive secretion that male beetles produce, and that they actually give the secretion to the female beetles. So both beetles actually have the secretion. And it's a defensive secretion that keeps mammals, animals like us, and other animals away, and it makes them more difficult to be fed on. The other problem, besides you touching it, is that these blister beetles, and they're in the family Meloidae, these beetles like to feed on alfalfa. And, well, there are horses and cattle that we feed alfalfa hay to. If there are too many of these beetles and too many of these secretions in the hay, it can cause real problems, even death, to horses and cattle that eat these. So there are some ways to properly harvest your alfalfa or treat it with insecticides before harvesting to eliminate or reduce that problem with the beetles. So basically, yes, the active ingredient, the cantharidin, can be used dermatologically. There are some other treatments for that. So I hope I've answered your question,
I
Jody.
think you definitely probably helped Jody out. Now, I have a quick follow-up to that as well. So as a student entomologist, one thing that we do is we have to go out and collect and preserve insect specimens. Now, a rumor, which I don't know if is true or not, is they say watch out when you handle blister beetles, even if they are dead, because you could get the cantharidin to rub off on your fingers, or if you squish the dead one per se, that you might be able to get blisters. Is there any truth in that? If you were to find a dead one, should you touch it?
Absolutely. The cantharidin doesn't, since it's a lipid, since it's a fat or a grease, it doesn't evaporate very quickly.
Oh.
So yes, if you grabbed a blister beetle or squished it on your hand or something, yes, you could still be exposed to it.
Okay, so thank you for that, Dr. Pell. So if you find one, don't handle it without gloves or anything on.
And don't eat it.
Yes, don't eat it as well. That would not be pretty well. Our second question from Jody is, we would also like to learn about praying mantises. Specifically, why do the females eat the males? And is this something that's common, or does it only occur in the wild? Or
Okay, well that's a really good question. And we see this predation on males in lots of different species, whether it's a black widow spider or praying mantises, or even some cockroaches, where the females will actually prey on the males even while they're mating. The idea is that by feeding on the male, the female is assured getting enough protein and vitamins and fats to properly nourish and develop her eggs. So it's a way for the male to give a contribution to his offspring without even being there.
probably one he's not aware of until it's too late, too.
Absolutely.
Oh,
Now, as far as the second part of that question, do we know whether this happens in nature? Well, it's been seen, but we really don't know how common it is.
okay, thank you for that, Dr. Pell. And finally, Jody's final question is, how can we attract mantises or any other cool-looking bugs? But she wants to be aware they cannot be harmless. I mean, they must be harmless, so nothing dangerous to our flower bed.
Oh boy, tough question. So as far as I know, there's no way to attract praying mantises. They are solitary predators, and the only way to really attract them would be to have lots of prey, and then you wouldn't have your pretty flowers. So one way to get praying mantises is you can purchase praying mantis egg cases and let those egg cases hatch, and they'll release hundreds of little praying mantises in your garden.
Well, thank you for that, Dr. Pell. So there you go. If you can't find them, go buy them.
There
But
you go.
they'll
This
be
is
out.
America.
Yes. So our next question is going to be from Kennedy. She says, what purpose do mosquitoes serve in the ecosystem, or do they exist purely out of spite?
Oh, well, it certainly seems like they're there to spite us,
That's how it feels. Yeah.
but you got to look at it from more than just the human perspective. So to us, they are parasites, they're vectors, they're just terrible creatures. But there aren't actually that many different kinds of mosquitoes that will feed on people. Okay, so you figure a couple of hundred different species out of multiple thousands of mosquito species. But the better question might be, from an ecological perspective, what do mosquitoes do and what use do they serve? And mosquitoes have a immature or a larval stage that lives in the water, and they do some degree of filtering that water and pulling microorganisms and other things out just to feed on them. So some good might be that they clean the water a little bit. And then adult mosquitoes are food for many, many, many different types of animals. Everything from bats and birds to reptiles, amphibians, and even other insects. So they're a food source in the food chain, in the ecosystem. Also, there are a few reports of mosquitoes as pollinators of different plants. So there's some good, but again, there's a lot of bad for what they do to us.
Seems like the good is for everything but people.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So thank you for that, Kennedy. Our follow-up question is going to be from Nola. And Nola asks, Dr. Appel, what is your favorite bug?
Oh, well, that's a softball. So my favorite bug is the smoky brown cockroach.
You're going to have to explain that for a lot of people out there.
Well, yeah, I know. So I did my dissertation research on that cockroach because at the time that I was working on my degree, this species had just showed up in Southern California, and we knew virtually nothing about its biology and ecology. And people wanted to know whether they should spray down their yards, bring their pets and children indoors, hide from it, whatever. So I did a lot of research, laboratory and field research, looking at the physiology, ecology, and behavior of that species, and
So
made a lot of really good friends.
Yeah, they've grown near and dear. All right. Well, thank you for that, Hunter. So now we know his favorite bug. Justin is following up and is going to ask, is there a way to keep the common cockroach out of homes, like a plant or some powder we can lay around the house to act as a barrier?
Oh, okay. So with cockroaches, just like with mosquitoes, there are relatively few species that are actually pests. Probably Justin is talking about these smoky brown cockroaches or American cockroaches or Asian cockroaches that come into the house from outside. Now, in that case, these are species that would much rather be living outside than in your house. And pretty much anything you do to create a barrier will keep them out. The most effective thing is to seal points of entry into the house. This can be cracks, crevices, the area under your front door, something like that. And basically, you just need to seal up these points of entry, physically seal them. There are materials, there are pyrethroid insecticides, there are various dusts and repellents that will keep cockroaches away, but only for a little while. Most of these compounds, when they're exposed to sunlight, heat, humidity, they degrade very rapidly. And even if they were really good repellents, they're gone in a few days. So I would say the physical plugging up points of entry, proper screens on windows, screen doors, things like that. If you can see light maybe coming under a door, then a cockroach can get through.
Oh,
So
okay.
anything you can do to minimize those points of entry will help tremendously.
So essentially, most of them just wander in and they don't want to be there any more than you want them there,
Well,
except for a German or something like that.
well, and they would not be outside. So pretty much they're wandering in, and in many cases, they'll wander in and you'll find them dead because outside has lots of food, is humid, lots of water. They come into the house, the humidity's low, and maybe there isn't the food and the water, and they just die.
Okay. Well, thank you for that, Dr. Appel. Next question comes in from Hunter, and Hunter asks, why have insects evolved to have exoskeletons?
Ooh, now there's a real thoughtful question. Why have they evolved? Well, insects have always had them. And I think the way you should look at this question is, what did insects evolve from? And we think that insects evolved from something like a worm that also has something like an exoskeleton.
Mm.
So it's a process. They had exoskeletons because their progenitors had exoskeletons. Just like we have skeletons, we have endoskeletons because our progenitors had endoskeletons. So they started down that track and they continued with having exoskeletons.
Okay. Thank you for that, Dr. Appel. Follow-up question from Chelsea. Piers maybe is a fan of The Walking Dead or something of the sort. Chelsea asked, are there particular insects that refuse to lay eggs upon corpses if another species has laid eggs already on that corpse first? Or do they care?
Ooh, well, I'm glad we don't have walkers yet.
Yet, yes.
Yeah. Yes, there are species when a corpse or when a animal dies, that corpse begins a process of decay and degeneration. There are insects that specialize on each stage of that decay process. So certain species of fly will lay their eggs on a freshly dead corpse.
Mm-hmm.
Others, it'll be like a week after decay, and maybe some beetles come in 2 weeks after. So there's a normal pattern of species that appear at a corpse, and there is some competition. So there are some flies that will eat each other's larvae, eat each other's eggs if they're competing for the same resource. So as far as I know, it's a matter of timing when the fly or whatever would prefer that stage of decay in the corpse. And then there can be competition between species at that particular time.
There it is. That answers the question pretty well. So timing and competition are some of the key attributes there. So our next question is from Gwendolyn, and Gwendolyn asks, I have a friend who claims diatomaceous earth can be used to kill household pests such as cockroaches and bed bugs. Is this true? If so, are there any particulars on how to use it?
Oh, so I've looked at diatomaceous earth in a number of studies, and yes, it will kill bed bugs, cockroaches, ants, whatever. But to be most effective, it has to be applied as a very thin powder or dust. And you can't just pile it up in the corner or along edges. In theory, the way this stuff works is the diatomaceous earth, which is made up of the exoskeleton of creatures called diatoms, actually cuts into the cuticle and causes insects to desiccate. So this works better with insects that have hard exoskeletons with wax coverings, something like a stored products beetle. Okay, because then it would those cuts would stay open longer. something like a cockroach that has a greasy coating of lipids does get cut, but then that layer reheals quickly because it's greasy. Okay. So what happens is you get abrasion of the cuticular layer and desiccation. So this stuff works best in dry environments and with insects that have this hard, waxy exoskeleton.
Oh, okay.
So really, diatomaceous earth works best against stored products beetles in maybe dry grain because it's very dry and they can be desiccated there.
Okay.
It works worst against things like cockroaches or in humid environments.
So something that's very, I guess you could say, afraid to lose water is, an insect that it would work the most against, or.
Yes, definitely, and in dry environments.
Dry environments too. Okay, thank you for that, Dr. Appel. Our next question is from David, and David asks, what do you do if you see termites flying around your house? And then the next question, which I'll put in this as well, is how do you know if it is a termite or a flying ant?
Okay, so first let's look at the difference between ants and termites. First of all, you could look very closely and you would see that termites have two pairs of wings that are pretty much identical. They're similar length and they look the same. They also have no mechanism to hold the wings together. If you look at an ant, the forewings are much larger than the hind wings. And there are small hooks that connect the forewings and the hind wings, and those hooks are called hamuli. Oh. You can also look closely at the insect body, and the body of a termite is broad from about the thorax all the way down to the end of the abdomen. But if you look at an ant, it has a constriction between the thorax and abdomen, and it's very easy to tell the difference if you look closely at them. Also, there are characteristics of the antennae and the way the thorax is built. So it's easy to tell the difference. Now, what do you do if you have termites? Well, there really isn't a whole lot. Termites will swarm, and the termites we have here in Auburn, Alabama, usually are either eastern subterranean termites, which tend to swarm in the spring on a sunny day with no wind after a rain. Is that about right?
Yep, that sounds about right to me.
Okay. And you'll see just millions of them. Well, they don't do any damage themselves. They're flying, and most of them land and are eaten by ants, lizards, or anything that eats insects. Okay, spiders, whatever. I think it's more important to see if you can figure out where they're swarming from. So if they're coming out of your house, you have a problem.
Yeah.
But if they're coming out of a stump, somewhere in your yard, you need to pay attention to that and maybe have that stump treated. But it's less of a worry than if you have them coming out of your house. So where they're coming from makes a difference, but definitely if you can figure out where they are coming from, you should get them treated.
All right.
because you don't want them like getting into your house.
Yeah, that's definitely, you definitely do not want termites in your house. Oh man. David also asks, as a follow-up question, he says, where do fire ant mounds go in the summer, and why do fire ant mounds move?
Oh, well, I've actually done research on that. Where do the fire ant mounds go in the summer? They go down.
Mm.
They go down where it's cooler and wetter. So they do not disappear. They're there, but you just don't see them. Now, as for why they move around, because they don't like where they are. And we did some research where we drove over fire ant mounds, and they will move out of the way. They don't want to be driven over. We did experiments where we took a baseball bat and beat the ground next to a fire ant mound, and they move away. They don't like that. We also did some research where we treated individual fire ant mounds with conventional insecticides and with a mint oil solution. And what we found is that if the mound lived, it didn't want to be there anymore. So it moved. Basically, the ants are avoiding stimuli that they don't like. So they're avoiding the insecticide. They're avoiding the mint oil. They're avoiding vibrations. They're going somewhere else.
Now, in the summer, does something such as temperature play a role in their mounds as well?
Yes. So fire ant mounds are really amazing designs. There's a temperature gradient, there's a humidity gradient, and during the day, the ants will move the eggs and the larvae up and down within the mound to properly incubate them at the right temperature.
Wow.
So as conditions change, they're moving their immatures around.
That's very advanced. Yeah.
Hey, they're good at what they do.
They have to be. Our next question is going to be from John, and John is a very contemporary individual. John asks, do insects get the coronavirus?
The short answer is no. I have read nothing about that, and when you look at the way coronaviruses infect, it's just not something that an insect would get. The coronavirus that we're talking about is primarily a respiratory disease, and something that you would either inhale or touch and then touch your face. These are not relevant to insects.
So there you have it, folks. So far, you don't need to worry about insects with the coronavirus. John also asks, probably a more personal question. He asks, how or why do I have so many cockroaches in my house?
Well, how do you live, John? Well, probably because there's food somewhere for them to eat and the right conditions. So that means there's enough food, enough water, enough harborage area for them to survive and reproduce well. John needs to make some alterations to his house or to his housekeeping style. That'll help.
That could probably do the trick. His final question, oh no, I take it back. He has two more. His next question, probably due to a lot of playing Missile Command as a child or something, is, are cockroaches the only creatures which will survive a nuclear war? Why or why not?
Ooh, well, probably not. I'm sure there are other things that live in the ground that would survive. Cockroaches will definitely survive. They are the ultimate survivors. But probably anything that lives in the ground or under a rock where it wouldn't be exposed to as much radiation would probably be able to survive. Probably some of the insects that are exposed or that are plant eaters above ground, probably they would be in real trouble.
Mm. Wow. Okay, well, thank you for that. And then John is also an aspiring entomologist, it seems, and he wants to know what led you to become an entomologist, and then how can one who's, let's say, interested in becoming an entomologist become one?
Ooh, well, the best answer that I have ever heard when I've asked that question of other entomologists is a misspent youth, but I can't say that. I was inspired by a class that I took as an undergraduate, and this undergraduate course in entomology was taught by a former medical entomologist in the Army. He was actually a mosquito taxonomist.
Mm.
We had 6 people in our class, and 5 of us are professional entomologists.
Wow.
And we were all undergraduates at the time. And the 6th person is a biogeographer, and she uses insects in her research.
Wow.
So
that instructor needs a raise, apparently.
Yeah, he was absolutely incredible. So I think having the right inspiration, the right professor makes all the difference in the world. It just opened up a whole area of interest for me. Wow. Now, what can you do to become an entomologist? Well, depending on whether you're a high school student, an undergraduate student, where you are, getting a mentor, whether that mentor is a county agent, a high school teacher, a university professor, we're all looking to help people and interact with people that are interested in insects. So find a mentor. Mentors could be someone at a botanical gardens, the butterfly house at Callaway Gardens, anywhere, and start talking to them. There's also a lot of things you can read online and get involved that way.
Well, thank you for that one. And our final individual who's asking questions is going to be Bryant. And the first question Brian asks is, what ecological role do roaches serve? I believe we briefly covered that earlier, but just in case.
Well, so most cockroaches are not pests. There are probably 35 to 40 species that have ever been recorded being pests out of maybe 6,000 different species. So it's pretty good odds. What role do they serve? They're pretty much the recyclers, the garbage men of the insect world. Whenever there's debris, there's waste, decaying material, those bodies you mentioned earlier, there'll be cockroaches there ready to eat and recycle. We've also learned recently that termites are really nothing but a social cockroach. And what do termites do? Termites do the same sort of thing, only they're recycling dead wood and cellulose material. So the whole group is basically a recycler. So that's what they do in the ecosystem. There are some termites and there are some cockroaches that are known pollinators. So that might be useful.
And we're going to wrap up with our final question, which is one that asks, what is your best field work story?
Oh, well, so as a graduate student, I was doing field work in, right, being an urban entomologist, we did field work in apartment buildings. So we got to see the way lots of different people lived. It's kind of amazing what you can walk in on. And remember, I was doing this in the 80s in Southern California.
So not too long ago, not too long ago.
No, a few weeks ago.
Just about the other day, yeah.
All I can say is I have never seen so many bricks of cannabis in my life.
Wow.
Like a whole living room full of them.
Wow. What kind of homes were these? Yeah.
It was just, somebody's apartment. And of course, it was like, just interested in the roaches.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The next time we were there, the apartment was abandoned.
Oh, I wonder why. That is pretty funny. That's a good one. Wow. Well, I guess we'll ask Dr. Appel, we thank you for coming on today. And do you have anything else you want to leave a message for or anything like that?
Well, I just want to tell people that they should pay attention to nature, look around, and think about what they're seeing, because there are lots of insects there. There are lots of interesting things that are happening. All you have to do is take the time to notice them.
All righty. Thank you, Dr. Appel. We appreciate you having you on. And with that, we will wrap it up.
All right. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.